Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Be Warm Butter, where we're going to teach you how to write your elevator pitch and different ways that you can use it to start networking while you're still in school. My name is Jason Thomas. I'm one of the peer educators here at the University of Texas at Dallas's Career Center. With me today is Erica Wynn. She is also a peer educator. And we are going to be talking to you about the butter concept. What is it? Why are we talking about butter with elevator pitches? Give you some tips on how to write your elevator pitch and why you should have one. And then also different ways that you can use your elevator pitch and your different networking resources while you're in school to start really get used to that skill of building up your professional network. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Miss Wynn to talk about the butter concept.
All right, so first things first, let's address the question you all probably thought when seeing this. Why butter? Well, butter and butter alternatives take a great base and elevates it to the next level. Much like us, Comets, we have so much potential and worth to bring to the job market and to our prospective employers. But some of us, myself included, may be cold butter. As you might know, it's a little bit frustrating to take fresh from the fridge cold butter and try to smear it nicely on the carb of your choice. It's going to flake, it's going to fall apart, while failing to smoothly spread. Similarly, in new situations with new people, I tend to freeze up and I get those uncomfortable knots of anxiety in my stomach and have to fight this fight or flight kind of urge. How about you, Jason?
I am that way all the time. I have to really practice and put on the brave face, the bravado, to hide the fact that I'm just terrified of these social situations and these networking events and like mixers and stuff like that, where you have to go and talk to somebody and actually ask them, "Hey, um, can I get something from you?" Basically.
Right. And unfortunately, like networking are these new situations with new people, and we can't always run away. So, what can we do to avoid this? We have to warm ourselves up to these situations, which is why Jason and I are presenting this to help our fellow cold butter friends and our warm butter friends identify and ease those anxieties with networking and endeavor to become better. Um, all right, moving forward. Um, So, to kind of become warm butter, we have to figure out why we feel these things. So, the first thing that comes to mind when networking situation is my very own first experience. It was at a social event at the hospital I was volunteering at in high school, and I'd just been dropped off by my parents. I'm borrowing my older sister's blazer and pencil skirt, and just generally feeling like a professional adult in borrowed clothing and just it was a mess. And at that networking event, there were like my supervisor's coworkers, their boss, and I remember the entire time the thought foremost in my brain was, "Am I going to make my supervisor look bad? What if I say the wrong thing?" So clearly, this isn't the most ideal situation for networking, but just because I was scared and scarred in my first networking experience doesn't mean that every experience will be like that. Looking back, it wasn't nearly as bad as high school me thought it was. So, yes, I was a little stiff, a little awkward, but nobody got fired. The world didn't end. It was fine. So, that was my story. How about you, Jason? What comes to mind when you first hear the word networking?
I also look back to one of my earliest experiences. I went to a conference where there were all these panels and then this big, like, open floor mixer area with booths from the different companies. And I remember going to all the panels that I wanted to, and like sitting in the front row and taking notes. I didn't really engage with the presenters though during the panels, and then after the panels, going down to the mixer section, I just felt too awkward to actually go and talk to any of the people that I just spent like an hour listening to. Uh, so it definitely felt like that cold butter. I just ended up leaving early and not really making any actual connections. I still learned something, but that networking connection would have been the real value from that experience.
Right. It's so easy to look back and think, oh, what could I have done better? But something to keep in mind is we're all improving. This is something we're all working on. It's a transformation journey. And networking, just like anything else, is a skill you build up over time. It won't always be linear. Some days you can really muster that courage to, talk to someone you don't know. And some days it's a little trickier to find that groove. But the most important thing is just putting yourself out there, and be kind to yourself when going through this process. It's not always going to be easy. It's easy to look at the negatives and think, oh man, I could have done that. I could have done that. But we're all learning and we're improving. And thankfully, Jason's going to equip us with some really good elevator pitch tips that will really help us out. Right, Jason?
I am. We'll get to that in just a minute. Before we do that, let's look at different ways that we can start improving and warming up our butter.
Sounds good to me. So the most common causes for that warm butter anxiety are fear and feeling underprepared. So to address these concerns, let's kind of put things into perspective. The worst people can say in types of situations are, no, they don't have the availability, no, they can't help right this second. And it's just best to just take that no and just assume that they're busy and it's just not a good time. This doesn't necessarily reflect poorly on you. It's just a timing issue. If circumstances were different, recruiters, professors, whomever you wish to connect with, people are generally willing to help if it's within their power to do so, and if you were kind and respectful in your requests. Another cause of cold butter anxiety is feeling underprepared. Maybe you're not sure who you're meeting with, or you don't know what you don't know, so it's kind of hard to figure out what it is that you do want to know. We're going to get into some practices to put these into place so that we can get a better sense of how to ease that uncertainty, because practice makes perfect. All right, so we keep talking about warm butter, but what does this mean and how can we be it? Basically, it boils down to these points. You won't magically become an expert overnight at networking. It's going to be something that you continuously work on, but it's about becoming more comfortable with marketing your brand. Now, I said brand, but that's kind of like an odd thing. Like, are we McDonald's? Are we like Nike? Your brand is who your online persona is, right, Jason?
Right. We actually, whether you're conscious of it or not, we all have multiple brands actually, depending on how we present ourselves in different situations, whether it be online or in person. Just to take the online example a little further, my personal brand, if you go to my Instagram, you're going to see pictures of cupcakes and plants and my brother's dog, because I am a nerd who likes plants and bakes cupcakes and really, really loves that dog. That's my brand on LinkedIn. It's kind of fun loving and kind of silly. My LinkedIn profile, if you look at that, you'll see a lot of different things. You're going to see some thought leadership, about career building and inclusivity in the STEM field. I'm really presenting myself very differently on my LinkedIn than I am on my Instagram. And that's also true for my Facebook, my Twitter, and even just how I present myself in different social situations, whether it's in class or at work or with my friends. So we all have kind of multiple brands that we present to the world, and that's just really who you are.
Exactly. It's just different facets of yourself in different settings. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I like to see actionable things about how I can keep things, what I can keep in mind to help me focus towards progressing. So, ta-da, here they are, steps to kind of become a little bit more prepared in becoming warm butter. So they are research, take notes, follow up, and repeat. So in the next slide, we're going to delve a little deeper into the research. So first things first, before any interview, job, or informational events and or job fairs, you're going to want to know some of these basic questions and the answers to them. Who are you going to meet with? Who's going to be there? What is it that you're seeking to find out more about? And what are your intentions in gaining this information? So before you set foot in the room, just kind of have these equipped and at the ready so that you're not unaware and immediately seize up into that cold butter. And the best way to kind of put these into practice is to kind of do a little prep work beforehand, really refine your opener. And that opener is also known as
your elevator pitch. So we will definitely be talking about that in just a few moments. Before, we're going to go over a few more notes on the things you can do to be warm butter with Erica. and then we'll go into how to use and how to write your elevator pitch.
Exactly. And that elevator pitch we're also granted and gifted with the lovely Jason Thomas, the king of elevator pitches. But anyway, once we move past that first step, in that situation, what you're going to want to do is take notes. It's not just for the classroom anymore. When we had job fairs in person, I always had copies of my resume with me, which can be edited by our resume editor at utdallas.edu. And also my notebook to write down those important details from recruiters. These could be information such as who to reach out to or dates to keep an eye out for. This helped me not only because I'm a visual person, but I'm also a forgetful person. I kind of need to write these things down as soon as possible and so that I can remember to like follow up on. If you're gifted with a better memory than I am, congratulations, and know that we're extremely envious of you. It's going to sound awkward, but the reason why I personally advocate for writing down notes is it shows a level of engagement and a sense of importance to whomever you're speaking with. It kind of gives you a place to organize information, refer back to, and create that checklist. And also, in general, when we had job fairs in person, if you were going to meet so many different recruiters and they were all going to give you different dates and different people to reach out to. So it was just really handy to keep that all together. Unfortunately, with these uncertain times, things look a little bit different. So there are things called virtual job fairs and all that stuff. Jason, do you have a little bit of insight to shed on these?
Yeah, so we do actually have another one of these power hours coming up next week. That's being put on by myself and another one of our peer educators, Jay Glessner, that's going to explicitly talk about preparing for your first virtual career expo, and how it's different and how it's the same as preparing for a regular expo, and just kind of different things to consider. There are actually a lot of similarities. A lot of the things that you're going to do for a regular expo, you do apply to the virtual expo in the same way. And it just doesn't really hurt to ever practice. Again, like Erica said earlier, the worst thing that can happen is that they say no. So if the more you put yourself out there, the more you practice it, the better you're going to be equipped to handle that no. But then you're going to get more and more developed, so that way you can really land that yes.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Next, what can we kind of do after that initial meeting? No matter if you get that no or if you get that yes, make sure to always reach out to whomever you spoke to. Like thank them for their time and advice and kind of show your interest in that company, in the job market, and just make that general great impression for your brand. Remember to thank them no later than the next day. The sooner, the better. And while you're kind of reaching out, maybe consider connecting with them on LinkedIn. It should be something to expand your network and kind of help you go through with your improvement. Lastly, don't forget to give back. Look for opportunities to help others the way that you were helped. After all, humans are social creatures for a reason. We're not meant to do all this by ourselves.
Yeah, and one thing that's going to help you with these, especially putting in your LinkedIn plan into action, is our next topic, which is what y'all signed up to hear about, and that is the elevator pitch. So by a show of hands, who's actually written or heard of an elevator pitch before? You don't actually have to raise your hands. I can't see any of you. But if you've never written an elevator pitch before, don't worry. We're going to walk you through what they are and how you can use them. And we're also going to have a nice little workout or work activity. There we go. Worksheet that you can take home, and it will help you walk through all of the steps to writing your first elevator pitch. So what is an elevator pitch in business? This is a way for you to present an idea or a product very concisely. It gets its name because it's literally supposed to take as much time as it would to ride an elevator from the ground floor all the way to the top. So in this case, you are the product. An elevator pitch is how you sell yourself and your value to somebody else. It should explain kind of who you are and how you're different from other people that are like you in just that 30 to 90 seconds. And because of how they're used, it's often good to finish with a request or some form of open-ended question that prompts the listener to engage back with you. The reason why I say this is because mostly where it's used is for introductions or during an interview to answer the about me question. There's lots of different ways we can talk about it, which is the intended uses. So again, introducing yourself in an interview, introducing yourself at a career fair, but also in an email. If you've never spoken with this professional before and you're trying to figure something out, you can use your elevator pitch as a way to introduce who you are and lead into your request before you just say, hey, can I have this thing? Giving the recipient a very high level understanding of who you are and what you want is really important to present yourself effectively. So, and like I mentioned, this is a great way to answer the tell me about yourself question that comes up in interviews. It comes up in most interviews. So it's a good thing to prepare and practice for. And like we talked about with LinkedIn, it's a way that you can actually request connections on LinkedIn. Not most of the time. Every time you request a connection on LinkedIn, there's an option of including a message, which we highly recommend doing. So that way people know who this person is that's requesting a connection with them. And an elevator pitch is a great way to introduce yourself, how you know them, and your request in this instance is just please connect with me.
Gotcha. So what else can we do with an elevator pitch aside from just kind of introducing ourselves in person or online?
All right, so yeah, like Erica said, there's more uses than just what you're supposed to. Those are kind of the intended uses, but there's also extended uses for your resume or for your elevator pitch, whether this is on your resume. You may have heard that the objective statement has fallen out of favor or fallen out of fashion, and it's now preferred to replace them with a profile statement or a professional summary. And your elevator pitch is perfect for that. It's basically a thesis statement of your entire resume. Just remove the request for assistance from the end of it. You can even replace the request for assistance with an objective, like, hey, I'm looking for an internship, or I'm looking for this kind of job specifically. It also works on your about section on sites like LinkedIn and Handshake. Again, just anywhere you need to introduce yourself very, very quickly.
Gotcha. And another note, with resumes, make sure that you're tailoring your elevator pitch to your application, so you can really show that alignment between your interests and that company's interests.
Yes, exactly. And speaking of tailoring your elevator pitch, it's everyone's favorite topic. It's cover letters. We all dread writing them. We all have to hear about how we're supposed to write a new one with every single application. We're not here to harp on you about that today. Although you should write a new one every time you apply. This is a way to do that in a less daunting manner, to really create a custom tailored cover letter without putting in too much work to completely rewrite the whole thing. And the way you do that is by taking your elevator pitch, because like we said, your elevator pitch is basically the thesis statement for your resume, and that's also true of your cover letter. So if you use a writing style known as the snowflake method, you can actually expand your elevator pitch out into a full cover letter just by answering a few questions and expanding on your answers. Now, if you've never actually heard of the snowflake method, you've probably actually used it before. This is a really basic way that people train or students learn how to begin writing in primary school. But just in case, that is part of our activity packet that we're going to be handing out in a minute. So don't worry if you don't know how to do the snowflake method, but it's just a way to expand a single thesis statement and build it out by expanding on each of your arguments and supporting each of your arguments into a full letter. So I mentioned this activity packet a couple times now. What is it going to do? I'm going to drop it in the chat real quick, and I'll drop it again at the end of the presentation just in case you don't grab it now. But this will walk you through how to create an elevator pitch, what questions you should be answering in your pitch, and then how to expand that out into a cover letter using the snowflake method that we just discussed. All right, you tired of hearing me say the word elevator pitch? Because I am tired of saying it. So let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, which is those networking opportunities for while you're still in school. So we've told you how you can prepare to start networking, but where can you actually do it? In this section, I'm going to go over some of the opportunities that are available for you to start networking while you're still in school, while you're still a student and earning your degree. We also have that activity sheet. It's going to have a couple activities for actually putting these things into practice once we're done. So the main things we're going to talk about are university events, what you can do in the classroom, different student organizations, and your online networking. We're going to focus that on LinkedIn. So with university events, to start off, UT Dallas system puts on tons of events that you can use for networking. Our Career Center actually has an employee relations team that puts on events specifically for networking with employers in the DFW area. And some of the schools that make up the university, JSOM and ECS, actually have their own Career Center that also hosts their specific networking events that are kind of more tailored to your degree. If they're virtual like this one, you can still participate in networking by participating in the chat and asking questions, just like you would in a in-person expo or in a real panel. So just because it's virtual doesn't mean that you can't practice your networking. I recommend preparing a couple questions beforehand and asking them when they're topical to what the presenter is saying or holding them until the end. Trust me, presenters love it when you ask questions, and you'll definitely get more out of it if you ask them.
Definitely helps with that feeling of shouting out to the void and hoping something sticks. Those questions really do help.
Indeed. All right, and kind of going off of that, talking about activities that you can do in the classroom. In a lot of ways, a classroom is a lot like a networking event. I mentioned that I was at a conference and I went to panels where we had a presenter talking to us just like I'm talking to you now. And that's pretty much the same format as your classroom. The lecturer is, your professor is the presenter. So be prepared to be active in the discussions in class. You don't want to be disruptive. You're not trying to ask questions that take away from the conversation, but when the professor asks the class a question, go ahead and try to answer it. Or if you have a question about the material that they're covering, don't be afraid to ask. It's a very simple way to highlight yourself for both you and the professor and your other classmates. Just remember that this goes both ways. Again, we don't want to be disruptive because that can be a negative form of networking. If you're not comfortable with standing out in class like this, there's other things you can do as well to start networking with your professors, because your professors are kind of like your first most important networking opportunity while you're in school. They are the professionals who know the people and have the connections that you want to land those first jobs. And a great way to engage them in a one-on-one setting is going to be through email or through office hours. Both are great ways to engage with them without putting yourself out there in front of a larger audience. And you can do the same with your fellow students, either by talking to them individually or joining a study group or participating in the online chats. Most of the classes I've taken so far at UTD have had a student-led Discord or GroupMe set up by the first class session. Just ask around for the link in the class. Now, while you're engaging your professors and classmates is going to be great practice, but your networking efforts will be best spent if you're doing these in the courses with the people that are relevant to your major. So that's going to be students that are also in the same major or professors that are teaching a subject specific to your degree. So that brings us to student organizations. Most student organizations are really student chapters of professional organizations, and this makes them great practice for joining the professional chapters after graduation. There are a lot of options related to specific industries, but you don't have to restrict yourself to just groups that are relevant to your major. You just pick an organization or a group that is relevant to your interests and your career goals. Remember not to spread yourself too thin. Student organizations are great, but you want to try to not join so many that you don't have any time to study. And lastly, we're going to talk about, sorry about that. Last thing we're talking about is networking opportunities online. We're going to talk primarily about LinkedIn. Yes, you should have a LinkedIn profile. We recommend those for every student that comes into resume advising. It's just a great tool to have. The main reasons to set up a LinkedIn profile could be an entire presentation all on its own. So today I'm just going to focus on what you can do to get started after you've set up your profile. The most common thing for students to do with LinkedIn is to connect with your classmates. There is definitely value to casting a wide net, as you never know who's going to end up where. So you could have a friend in a completely random class who winds up in a company that you want to work for later. You just never really know. But just like before, you're going to be best served if you really focus in on those students that are in the courses specific to your major, because they're more likely to be in the positions or in the departments that you want to be in. And the same thing is with adding your professors. I would specify that you want to follow your professors instead of connect with them. Following on LinkedIn means that you get to see their activity, but you're not actually in their network. It's kind of like they're in your network, but you're not in theirs yet. The reason I suggest following instead of connecting is because if you just follow a professor outright, they might not know who you are. You could be in a lecture hall of 100 people, and if you haven't really communicated with the professor, you're just going to be a name and they're not going to recognize you. So you want to wait to connect or to send that connection request until after you've established a kind of rapport with them, whether that's engaging them in the classroom or in office hours or through email. Yeah, it's just really important to establish that rapport by practicing that earlier advice. So like I mentioned, we have in that activity sheet, we have different networking opportunity assignments, sort of, so to speak. We gave you homework. What you can do is try to email one of your professors. One thing that I did last semester was to email a professor with essentially just my elevator pitch. I used my elevator pitch to open up and say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, and this is a topic that I'm interested in our field. Do you know anything about that? Or do you know anyone who is familiar with it? And he didn't. He had no idea what I was talking about, but he knew several other faculty members that did, and he put me in touch with them, and I had 5 new members of my network that I would have otherwise never met. So emailing your professor is a great way to start. Talk to one of your fellow students. Reach out to them on like your GroupMe or your Discord and just ask them, hey, why did you pick your major? And notice I said, why did you pick your major, not what's your major? Why is a much more interesting question, as what's your major is a 2-word answer, whereas why can be really deep and really personal without being too private or invasive. But you can be really surprised as to why people chose to do what they're pursuing. I'd also like you to look up one student organization. We're going to drop in the chat a link to the UT Dallas student organizations page, where you can go through and look up all the different organizations that are offered. Extra credit if you actually join one. Definitely recommend that. And then lastly, go ahead and follow all of your current professors on LinkedIn. Again, specifically the ones that are in the courses that directly relate to your major.
Now, we said it's homework, but where can we also send those elevator pitches if we kind of want to get a second look?
That is a great point. You can send your elevator pitches, your cover letters, your resumes to that resume editor email, resumeeditor@utdallas.edu, and we can review them and give you some feedback on them.
Amazing. And just to kind of wrap things up a little bit, we just want to send this like nice little reminder that networking is a skill. You're not going to be perfect the first couple times you do it, and that's okay. You're learning, we're all learning here, right? Just keep practicing at it, and it's going to get a little bit easier with time. And always don't forget to seek opportunities to give back to our fellow friends in our majors, or maybe those who aren't in our majors. You know, we humans are social creatures, and if we could do it alone, we wouldn't be doing all this networking to begin with. So we're not alone. We got each other, and we're all going to improve together.
That's right. All right, and so with that, we're going to open up the remaining time to you. But before we do, I just want to thank you for attending And I would encourage you all to fill out this short survey that I'm going to drop in the chat just to give us some feedback about what you thought of the presentation and some little notes on how you can get in touch with us later on. And one more thing, just remember you can always email us at careercenter@utdallas.edu for any questions. We're always here to help you. So, who has questions?